Okay, I think we are ready to continue with our program. So we have a next presenter will be Elina Seye, and she will start about the communities of West African dance and music in Finland. Welcome, Elina.
Yes, hi. So I'm also part of this project, Diversity of Music Heritage in Finland, and we just agreed that Antti-Ville, who is the leader, he will say a few words about the project later when he is presenting. And so my topic is West African dance and music in Finland, and how these traditions are practiced here in Finland, especially in Helsinki practically, because I haven't really had the time to go much outside of Helsinki, although I have contacts there as well and know a bit what's going on. And I have found this topic a bit challenging in the kind of within this project thematic, because the activities and the people involved do not seem to quite fit the common conceptions about intangible cultural heritage, which I will explain a bit more in detail now in this presentation. And as a background, I have been doing some research, or most of my research has actually been in Senegal in West Africa, but I've also been doing some research on African musicians in Finland about 10 years ago, so there's kind of a background there. But here I wanted to take a kind of a broader viewpoint, which became also actually clear when dealing with the professional musicians and their activities in Finland, that it's also very much connected to Finnish musicians. So you cannot really talk about just the African musicians, because they have always been collaborating with the Finnish musicians. And the same thing happens here, that it's not just West Africans who are practicing these traditions, but there are actually lots of white Finnish people like myself who are part of these communities. And to clarify very shortly about what I mean by West African traditions in this paper, or in this presentation, it refers mainly to the so-called Mande area around here, in the kind of westernmost parts of West Africa, or the Western Sahel, as they say in geographic terms. Well, you can read it there. So in Guinea, Mali, Burkina Faso, Senegal, and the Gambia, from these countries, also actually in Ivory Coast and Guinea-Bissau, but those from Ivory Coast or Guinea-Bissau or also Mali, I don't really know anybody who is from those countries or practicing specifically those traditions. So what is quite, well, I cannot say popular, but there is a kind of a community that revolve around these West African dance and music traditions, especially those of the Malinke people, or Maninka and Malinke is basically the same. So living in the easternmost parts of Senegal and in Guinea, but also kind of some traditions that are kind of from the same area, but not from actually these Mande groups of people. But the Mande area is kind of, because the Mande people were very influential in this area, so it's kind of connected in several ways, these different peoples and languages. So it's very hard to say about, just to clarify the situation, that why I cannot talk about Senegalese music or Guinean music, or although we might sometimes do that, but often the same people practice traditions that have origins in different countries because of the colonial past that drew these borders in certain places that were not kind of, then, so to say, national. So none of these countries are national kind of nations as such, but there are different peoples living in these areas. And yeah, what is important to notice that in Finland, many of these traditions have been practiced in dance classes, etc., from the late 80s, when there practically were no immigrants from those countries yet in Finland, or very few. And I have been around kind of in the scene since the mid-90s. So I have a kind of knowledge about the history that before I started doing any research on it. I know already that So what you might see and what people might expect to encounter when talking about West African traditions in Finland is maybe something like this that happened in 2019. It was called Senegambian Weekend. It was mainly organized by the Gambian Association, or the Women of the Gambian Association. And I actually heard recently that it was in collaboration with the Senegalese Association. And most of the musicians were Senegalese. It seems that the Gambian community, which is much bigger than the Senegalese, they actually don't have any musicians among them. Whereas the Senegalese community, which is much smaller, they have several very professional musicians, and they get them playing in this. And you could also see this is just 15 seconds, so I will show it, although it doesn't really relate directly, but it relates to the UNESCO Ice Age Convention, because the Kankurang, this masked character, is listed, I think, from Gambia and Senegal as a, on the representative list of intangible cultural heritage. And usually the masked figure would have 2 machetes, but since this was in the middle of Helsinki, in front of the Kampi commercial, the shopping center. So I suppose that's the reason why there are no machetes. So it's a kind of a scary character, which is maybe not obvious from this clip, but it's just to show you a little bit something. And there we remember. So this was a very short social media clip that I recorded myself. But as you can see in the photo, there were also Finnish people dancing just alongside of the Gambian and some Senegalese people as well. What may be a little bit unusual is the amount of women, because many of these West African communities have a lot more men than women. But since this was organized by the Gambian Women's Association, there were more women present. And this is maybe something you might imagine. But actually this is very rare that something like this happens. So maybe once a year many of the African associations will organize their kind of Independence Day party, and there might be some traditional dance or music or something like that. But they do not necessarily do it every year. And there are usually, within these communities, there are only a few people who might be specifically interested in dancing or be somehow involved in dancing or music making. And as I said, for example, the Gambians, I think there are something like 1,000 or 2,000 people in all of Finland, and there are no musicians. So they often either invite musicians from, for example, Sweden, or they work together with the Swedish musicians who have or with whom they kind of share their culture. So here is kind of there are also some pictures from some events and some bands. This is a performance. The other one was a kind of a more social dance event. So one might expect to find these kind of diaspora communities practicing dance and music, but this is, let's say, rarely the case, or mostly that's not the most typical thing that you might find. And usually most of the people, just like in Finland, I mean, not that many people are interested in traditional music, although we are now here in the kind of capital of folk music. So most Africans also, they are not very interested. They might kind of know, they recognize it, they say, yeah, that's our heritage, or whatever they might say, but then actually they do not really participate in it much. And what I've been asking specifically about is this kind of transgenerational transmission. And none of these associations, for example, the Senegalese or the Gambian or the other, have any regular kind of cultural activities for children. And that goes basically for all Africans in Finland. I have been asking, and I always get the answer that, well, maybe sometimes something a little bit, but there is not really a kind of regular transmission in these communities. Except maybe then for specific families where the parents or one of the parents might be a musician or dancer or something like that, or specifically interested in those traditions. And by contrast, there is a lot of activities, especially in Helsinki, but also in other bigger cities. So there are dance classes, there are drumming classes, there are other kinds of music classes going on regularly every week. Mostly there are events, there are performances, there are concerts. So there are lots of these kind of mixed groups, often maybe one led by an African teacher who has Finnish students, but also there are Finnish professionals who teach and perform, as you can see in these pictures. And I will show, because this is very new, we had in the beginning of July an event that I organized together with some of the kind of the central people in the Helsinki scene, let's say. So you will see, if you should pay attention, although there is a lot of attention on the dancers, but you can see at some point there are also some people who go to play together with the. So some of these musicians were kind of hired; they were engaged to play there, and thanks to Kone Foundation and our project, they were paid also something. But then there, as is usually the case in these kinds of communal events, there are people who know the rhythms and they will go and play for a while and then go back, or then there are also lots of white Finns participating in the dancing. Just a short clip. It was very hard to choose one, but I chose this one. Maybe I explain afterwards who the people are, why I chose this specific instance. For a while to explain what is going on. So most of this thing, all the dancing was basically improvised. So the musicians had agreed kind of what rhythms they will play, and more or less in what order, but that also, I think it changed somewhere along the way. So basically this is Outi who is kind of the dance teacher for most of the people who were dancing, who has been teaching since the late 80s, as I said, and she has been studying them in different countries, and mostly in Guinea, and most of the musicians are from Guinea, but there is also at least one from Senegal, one from Burkina Faso, and then there are, so as I said, some of the musicians are professionals, and some of their students are joining in. Marika Pelling, the balafon, is also a kind of long time musician, performer, dancer, whatever. And what is happening here is that there is Alia Kamara, who is also a professional dancer from Guinea, but nowadays, due to health issues, etc., has not been really doing much, but everybody kind of knows him. This older man, I mean. And they were dancing together. That was also improvised, but since they know each other very well, they were doing. And then there's the name just escaped me. This younger man, also from Guinea, a professional dancer, who was kind of responsible for kind of handing out. You could see there was a scarf that he was handing out to others, so giving kind of the turn that okay, it's your turn. And what happened in the beginning of this clip, that Outi was dancing, and then if somebody kind of dancing these specific steps that are to that rhythm, then others might join. So it means that this is the last step. So they will join in. And since, as I said, Outi is basically the dance teacher to most of the people who are there, so then there were lots of, basically everybody was joining in at that point. I got kind of distracted by this video. Okay, I'm trying to get back to the point and I have like 5 minutes left. So we go to Intangible Cultural Heritage, and here is a kind of a snippet from the UNESCO 2003 Convention. I think most of you know of this, and then there's the European Father Convention. How is kind of intangible cultural heritage defined here? And somehow, although it's not really explicit, but then there is this kind of generation to generation, the intangible cultural heritage transmitted from generation to generation, constantly created by communities and groups. So we can, oh, okay, these kind of mixed groups could be also those groups, but then there's this generation to generation, and also we kind of implicitly think about generations as somebody, which also happens in West Africa, that there are certain musicians who have learned to play in their families, so it's really their heritage in a very concrete sense. But then of course we white Finnish people who are involved, we have learned it from teachers, but then also some of the African musicians who were on stage, they have also kind of chosen to learn these traditions and not that they were forced to, as some of the others. And then in that sense, the Faro Convention, I feel, is a little bit more open to kind of this kind of mixing of peoples. And so in principle, it would be possible to look at just the diaspora communities, but the problem is that, especially in the case of West Africans in Finland, maybe with the exceptions of Nigerians and others who I'm not dealing with anyway, there are always Finns present, because many of them have come. There are men who have come here to work or to study or something like that, or they have come to Finland because they were married to a Finnish woman. So there are lots of these mixed families, and of course then they are part of also the kind of diaspora community events, just like these kinds of events. So the questions that I'm kind of asking here, so can these definitions of ICH then include the kind of communities of practice? Are these heritage communities, if many of these people who are involved have actually do not have a cultural background from West Africa? They have not been kind of living from the childhood these traditions, but they have learned it as adults or as young people. As you could see, a young boy who was playing the djembe as well in the video clip. And then who can kind of claim ownership of this heritage? Could maybe West African traditions become a heritage to some of the Finns. Like I said, some of these are professionals, they are doing this every day, although they are white Finns, and they are kind of respected also by West Africans as these are people who are experts, they know this tradition. So I've been asking a lot of questions to my fellow people who I dance and play with, or who I've been dancing and playing with for the past 30 some years. So I've kind of, these are some quotes on the kind of community aspect. It became very clear that people feel that there is a community, or there are maybe several communities that are somehow connected. So they feel that there are several kinds. Some say that, well, there are various kinds of networks. Some are closer and some are a little bit looser, and then they kind of come together, and then there are this, what I translated as Afro crackpots. In Finnish we say Afro hörhöt, which is kind of a positive term for somebody who's a bit crazy. And then there was also a situation, some said that, well, there's a kind of also a connection abroad, that you could go into a dance class in New York, or you could go to a dance class in Paris or wherever, and you're kind of connected through this tradition that is not ours. Let's say that there is a connection through Africa. Because these traditions are then taught in many countries in a very similar way, so you can kind of easily participate and you will know the steps, or you might not know the exact details, but you know something. And then there was about the question of ownership, which I asked many of the Finns, and they were very skeptical. They were like, well, it's not ours, and it's not... and both the African interviewees and the Finnish ones, they were very much emphasizing that, well, it's not enough to learn the steps or the rhythms or the whatever you're learning, but you also have to have the knowledge about the culture and what is the original connection of this rhythm, for example, that we're dancing. Where was it originally performed? What are the situations where people would dance it in West Africa or whatever country it is? And there is typical that there was a dancer from Burkina Faso, somebody who has really chosen dance as an adult, just like many of the Finns. And he was saying, well, it's okay. I was kind of provoking this, saying that, well, there are people who say that white people should not dance any African dance, and he was saying, well, it's okay. That there are many Africans who cannot dance, who are not even interested. So if you're interested and you're willing to do the work to learn everything, then it's okay. And then there's Cheikh Sissoko, who is from Senegal, somebody who is from a family of musicians going back generations and generations and generations, who was kind of forced to learn all the music and songs, etc. And he was also saying, well, if you have studied for many years, if you really know what you're doing, it's okay. But if you try to teach somebody who, although you don't know enough, then that will be a problem. And then there's Annina Tukkunen, who is also a dance teacher from Finland and has been studying in several West African countries. So, and this was also in the kind of, in the enthusiast sections, or even those who were not professionals, they were saying, well, there was always more to learn. And we will never know this tradition kind of well enough, although they were also aware that not, also in Africa, not everybody knows their kind of their own traditions, so to say. And then what I need to state, because I was asking about the kind of continuity or transmission, so what came kind of up there is that there's many of the African musicians especially, but also dancers I suppose, they really struggle to continue their work as artists, no matter what their level is, because many of them have learned either in the family or in some kind of an informal setting their what they can. So their expertise in these traditions is not recognized in any way. They don't have the diplomas to show, I know. And then they also have difficulties as immigrants to kind of navigate the system of knowing how to fill out forms and etc. and language learning and etc. 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 So I will not dwell on this, but I try to go to my conclusion. So there might be a few minutes for questions. And there's very little kind of institutional support for these activities. The teaching often happens in these kind of työväenopisto or something like that, not in the big institutions or in musiikkiopisto, these music schools, but in kind of more kind of hobbyist settings. Although many of these said that, well, I have also taught in the University of the Arts, I have taught in here and there, but usually it's like just for some certain workshops, they do not have regular classes there. So these are my conclusions, or actually more questions about what. So it seems that there is definitely a community, because everybody was saying yes, of course there is a community, or at least some sort of networks. And these are connected. So for example, if talking about diaspora communities and these kinds of enthusiast communities, they are kind of also overlapping, of course. And there is active transmission, especially in the kind of Finnish-dominated communities. But the kind of continuity of the practices kind of remains unclear. It's the same people who have been around since the 80s or 90s who are still there. But there are also some younger people, but not that many. But then it's clear that the Finnish people there, they do not see it kind of as their own tradition or their own heritage. And also I think the institutional support is one factor of making it, or of these practices becoming heritage here in Finland. So I don't have any answers, I don't have questions, I think, but you may have a few more questions that I may or may not be able to answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, thank you so much, Elina, for the wonderful presentation. Now we have still,
I think 3 minutes or something.
3 minutes for questions to be strict. You can warm up your questions. I have one question. I was thinking that you mentioned when they had this red mask costume in the one of the short clips, and that was the listed element to the UNESCO list. So do you think that when they are listing these kind of elements to the international lists, is it actually increasing the practice of this tradition also in the diaspora communities in other countries than where it was originally listed?
It might be. I don't know why it was. I've never seen. This is the only time I've seen this in Finland, and I've rarely seen it in Senegal because it's mostly in the southern part of Senegal, like which is adjacent to the Gambia, where it is practiced. I think I've seen it once or twice in Dakar. It might be, but I don't really know how to answer, because it kind of gains this kind of status, or this is important because it has been kind of listed and it's kind of supported then locally. But like I said, it's been listed I think by Gambia first, and then Senegal has been somehow added to it, but it's a very specific tradition.
Maybe first question, or then we can take a minute technical pause with more questions. Oh, Annukka has.
Question about institutions. What, in your opinion, should happen within or inside the institutions to get or gain more support? Because I think we have some kind of problem or issue in this in our research. So what would be the ideal thing to happen in institutions?
Oh, there's a million things that should happen in the institutions, especially thinking about the kind of music schools and dance schools. Well, somehow the people's expertise should be recognized, that these are like super trained professionals. At least, I mean, not all of them, but some of them. I mean, not everybody on stage is necessarily a professional. Like I said, you might go because you kind of support the event, and you go and you play for a while. Like there were 2 Finnish women who went to play for a while. I think one was playing because one of the drummers wanted to have a break to drink some water and knew that, okay, she knows how to play this, so come here for a while. And then, but the problem is that these are people that do not necessarily even have like solid reading and writing skills. So they do not have any kind of formal education or very kind of basic education also. Some of them do have more education, but usually they have not been to any kind of conservatory or something like that. So they do not have any diplomas to prove it. And they might not have a kind of a high school equivalent. I know there are several Tanzanian musicians in Finland who have already some kind of a diploma from their home country. So then they have been able to, for example, apply to the Sibelius Academy Global Music Program or something like that. So then they get these certifications. But then those people who have really learned from childhood onward in this kind of traditional system, often they do not have like even a kind of a school diploma, so that they would be able to apply to some kind of conservatory here. And it's really a problem. And then there are lots of things that should happen, because the whole Finnish system, from the music schools to the higher education institutions, they are all built on this Western classical music tradition, and there is absolutely no way that these kind of traditions that are learned in a very different way that could be fit in. And the musicians were always, at least some of them were saying, well, there's never time, we are so busy and we don't have the time to kind of sit down every night to play, because that's the way that they had learned, that they were there every day playing. And then how can you transmit that tradition here, where people maybe have 1 hour per week and don't bother to practice at home anyway, like in one of our groups.
Thank you, Elina.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. And the next one will be Antti-Ville Villén, the leader of our research project, Diversity of Music Heritage in Finland. And we asked also that Antti-Ville could tell a little more about our project, because now Annukka and Elina and I work for the project, and Giacomo will be presenting tomorrow, also part of the project. So that was our idea, and I will help you with the slides.
Okay, yes, good afternoon. It's my pleasure to be here. My name is Antti-Ville Villén, not Villén, but Villén. And I'm the only Villén in Finland. There are several in Spain, but I'm the only one here. No relation. Yes, I'm leading the project Diversity of Music Heritage in Finland, courteously funded by the Kone Foundation, started in the 1st of January 2023 and running until the end of this year. I'll come back to it in more detail in due course. My role is taking care of some of the necessary admin, and then trying to focus on these kinds of questions. How does the idea of music as cultural heritage relate to the cultural policy sphere, especially nowadays when these kind of questions of culture sector being under severe stress from different directions not maybe continuously in the air, but still that every now and then there are these curious notions of how we don't need culture. Well, my stance is we don't need it because we are culture, so that wherever there are human beings, there is culture. So in that sense, yes, the question is meaningless. But of course, it's a bit different than when you go to the explicit political sphere. So just to sort of, maybe this is to reiterate something that's very familiar to you, but the background here comes from the UNESCO Convention on Intangible Cultural Heritage, adopted in 2003 and then ratified in Finland in 2013. Then, as stipulated by the convention, the inventories, every country or state party, as it is called in the UNESCO system, has to then establish these inventories. The format of them is totally free. So then in Finland it started with the Wiki inventory in 2016 and then the launch of National Inventory in 2017. And curiously enough, the main implementing organization, namely what is now known as Finnish Heritage Agency, changed its English name into this from National Board of Antiquities. In Finnish, the name has remained the same. It has always been Museovirasto, basically the Bureau Office of or Agency of Museum or Museum Agents. So this also signals some of the kind of conceptual and political changes there that you could argue that okay, so how could National Board of Antiquities administer something as antique or tangible as, let's say, music? So that the notion of Finnish Heritage Agency is more inclusive in this sense. And then of course the kind of prime or pinnacles of these processes, that sauna culture was inscribed in the UNESCO inventories in 2020. The UNESCO inventory is coming from 2009. And then Kaustinen fiddle playing, which I guess has something to do with this place, was inscribed 4 years ago. And then in 2023, the Culture Heritage Strategy was released, or governmental resolution of it. And then also Culture Policy Report last year, where there is which you could say that it's basically that the report is or relies heavily on culture heritage strategy. So in the Cultural Policy Report, you do not find any definition of cultural heritage, while it's maintained over and over again that the cultural activity in the country is based and stems from cultural heritage. So in a way, if you wanted to know what cultural heritage actually means, you need to read the Cultural Heritage Strategy first and then go into the Cultural Policy Report. Then, of course, the big reports or agendas behind all these are the governmental programs. So the Cultural Heritage Strategy, while it was basically released under the current Orpo government, I like that formulation, Orpo government. So it came from, the initiative came from the previous Sanna Marin government. And then you can see a certain change there in the nomenclature, or these kinds of conceptualization again about how the society overall is approaching these. That the Marin program emphasizes inclusivity or inclusion and competence, while the Orpo one emphasizes strength and commitment. And therefore it should not be surprised that you can find the emphasis on cultural heritage also in the more recent security strategy for society. So cultural heritage is part of the overall security of the country. So, basically saying that we should have this, protect our cultural heritage in order to remain also secure as a society, which raises, of course, important questions concerning migration, especially. That how much diversity is allowed in this kind of a climate of securitization, as people call it. Here, I'm focusing on the kind of official aims of those are the strategic things. So that they are the overall guidelines, very abstract, which guideline directed, then the more detailed policies. And in the ministry, it's then stated that there are these three areas of emphasis: creativity, plurality, and inclusion. which is quite. I was struck by this word plurality there, because in strict linguistic terms, it actually refers to the fact that there are plural things in the world. I mean that there's one chair and there's two chairs. So that's plurality. The diversity, okay, yes, I can see differences there. This leg is a bit more, there's bump there and things like this. So, but in the policy documentation, they don't use this word. They use actually diversity. So this is a kind of a curious thing, that why is it there? Is it just a mistranslation, or is there something else? Somebody just suggested to me that it must be the Trump administration, that they came up with this list of forbidden words, and now they can't use the word diversity. No, actually Sanna Marin also already used this word, but maybe she has had then already a different agenda in her mind. So the project really focuses on questions of diversity. So here we don't have a logo for the project, so of course you ask the AI to produce you one. And then here are some certain versions from roughly a year ago, and then just yesterday, or 2 days ago, the last one, where heritage is also spelled quite interestingly. Anyway, we don't have to worry about the logos, although I like the Kallen Kallela version best. Incidentally, when I changed my surname, I was offered two choices, Villén and Villelä, and later on I decided, regretted that I didn't choose both of them, because then I would be Villén, Villelä. Anyway, so yes, there are 5 researchers. Now you've heard from Annukka, who's working on hip hop, and there you could say that the basic angles towards diversity have to do with questions of ethnicity and intergenerational dynamics, which in shortened version means age. So that what is the role of different kind of people in terms of their physical appearance, not just in terms of, let's say, the color of skin, etc., but also in terms whether they are old or young, or so in terms of defining who has the authority and the possibility to define what is heritage and take actively part in those activities. So Annukka, hip hop, touches on both of those, but maybe more emphasis is laid on the questions of intergenerational aspects there, that when can hip hop in Finland become a credible element of music heritage. And in Elina's case, the same question pertains: when can West African dance practices become a credible part of Finnish music heritage in Finland, with an emphasis on ethnicity. Then Giacomo Botta, who's going to talk tomorrow, he's been doing kind of a comparative work here Kaustinen and then also in Helsinki in certain kind of areas where they redevelop the city in order to bring in different stylistic, like club culture, music situations. So basically the question you could formulate there is that what's the balance between folk music practices and then these kinds of very, very popular nightclub type of things in terms of what we understand as music heritage. Janne Mäkelä, who is not absent, but this is the note to everybody on the project, we need to make a video for him. He's turning 60 today, and so maybe that's why he's not here. But he works on especially the question of how John Sibelius, as a figure, not his work so much, but as a figure, has been heritagized in Finland, and why is classical music by and large absent from these heritage lists. So it's in a way, you could say, maybe beyond heritage, because you probably say that okay, the club music, popular music type of repertoire is too lowly, too vulgar to be included in this prestigious heritage list. But then classical music, it's even more prestigious, so that we shouldn't be sort of making it into these mundane processes of heritage, but just let it lie there, or stay there above somewhere maybe, or maybe, all depending on the interpretation, whether it's the lowest of spheres of hell or the highest of heaven. Yes, that's open. I can live with both. Yes, well, of course, I need to acknowledge the impact of our research assistant Farida Albrecht, who's there, and then our videographer, editor Siiri Huttunen, who's here, and Outi Valo. Yeah, well, he's part of the furniture here, so my apologies. I knew that I forgot some. Yes. So how many years are you turning today? Where are we now? Okay. Yeah, and as said, Outi of course has this that we are immensely grateful for the collaboration with the project and the Folk Music Institute, because there is now this kind of immediate link to the heritage administration on its uppermost official level, meaning that Folk Music Institute is an accredited NGO in the UNESCO system, and therefore you could say that we, at least in principle, have access to the kind of a really messy policy debates that take place in that sphere. So we are, in a way, working on various scales. That we have the global scale, we have the national scale, this kind of comparative issues, different places, and also questions of migration, and then the rather local and maybe also to some extent regional scale there. That what happens on the municipal level, and even in these kind of more precise local communities like the West African community and the Espoo hip-hop people. Well, what is it? Posse? No, Posse. Yeah, but then, yeah, well, in when examining these policy reports, which is for various reasons decided to focus on those mainly. So what I've been sort of working on is this question of that we have these different notions of how we make sense of the past, and heritage is one of those. So that at least we assume that there's a link, that heritage just doesn't sort of pop out from nothing, but there is a link to the past phenomena. And then the question that leads into is this, that how do different concepts that we have also in relation to the past relate to the notion of heritage. And here's one way of trying to make sense of that, and especially when we think of then in Finnish language it's even more problematic, because the word for tradition and the word for heritage, they are very close to each other. So we talk about perinne, meaning tradition, and perintö, meaning heritage. So there's a lot of confusion between that. I would say that there's not as much confusion in other languages, or English and Swedish, which are the languages that I've been mainly reading in relation to this. But then also this idea that this is how you could say that the value of the past sort of increases. So that's why it's this value chain. Well, the logic I should hope that is clear enough. And then when we get to the heritage level, and also in these questions of that what kind of canons we might have here, especially in the realm of art, that those also lead to certain policies more directly than the mere notion of tradition. So we can have different kinds of traditions coexisting, but then when we get to the political sphere, it is the notion of heritage or the canon that becomes more valued, in the sense that then we start thinking, okay, so we have this long tradition and revered tradition, but that we call, for example, canon of, let's say, Western art music in Finland, which epitomizes in the works of Jean Sibelius. That then that leads to certain policies, like you could say that the establishment of Sibelius Academy is one result of this in the past years, or 100 years ago. And then it starts feeding back into these, especially to heritage through cultural policy and through educational policy to history, and then therefore also to canonization. How do we understand what what heritage should be and what kind of history should be taught, for example, in schools. There's a related sort of loop that might be called the cultural heritage loop. This comes from the Swedish researcher, archive director, Dan Lundberg is his name, and the book, well, the original book in Swedish is called Koklåtar, and it's been translated into English. It's openly available, the English version online, Singing Through the Bars. So it's about prison songs as cultural heritage. And there he represents this idea of cultural heritage loop, where you have these phases of the kind of the big bowl there. That's where when you collect in the kind of let's say that we are now dealing with the kind of ethnographic collection of archival material. That what you collect comes into this big bowl of different things. So that's from that you have to identify the, let's say now here, the prison songs, and that's the stage of identification. And then you have to be able to categorize them into different layers or the different kind of types, which is the smaller, the square container there. And then from that you get to standardization, which refers to the idea that the kind of most representative examples are chosen, and therefore the repertoire becomes more standardized. So you basically you can say that, well, you try to eliminate the mistakes, but by that process you also lose the diversity to some extent. And then it becomes symbolized through the mass production system, and also you could say that's where the canonization starts taking place, and then these certain kind of examples become more revered than others, and then they feed back to the performances, and people start sort of making maybe new versions, different versions, and so on, and then it sort of feeds back to the archival system. Well, now I'm going to skip that, which is, though it would be very interesting in itself, that what remains out, what are these trash containers there. But nevertheless, going back to the policing questions, that if we go back to the Ministry of Education ideas that we need to be fostering creativity, diversity and inclusion in this system, that then we could say that, okay, creativity is thereby in the performances and also in the kind of a creative labor, creative industry that forms a whole of its own, and then also that what kind of diversity is sort of maintained in different parts here. What is really included, excluded in terms of the kind of more formal aspects of the. So the first bowl basically represent different topics of songs. So that what kind of topics are the most desired, what we should get rid of. And then in terms of inclusion, that what kind of people are or have the possibility in a way and are you could say invited to take part of in these practices. And then when you go further to the policy sphere and the Ministry of Education, so that the cultural policy there focuses rather heavily on what is known as creative industry. So that you could say that culture, in that sense, in the cultural policy sphere, refers to arts and creative labor, creative industry. It does not refer to cultural diversity in the sense of different ethnic groups, for example, coexisting, but rather the emphasis in cultural policy is on creativity in this sense of industry. Diversity might be linked to these questions of that the Ministry of Education is also responsible for maintaining libraries, but then we come also to the questions of religious affairs and youth, or these kinds of like in the case of hip hop, that what are these intergenerational dynamics at stake? But then the notion of the kind of relationship between religious or religiosity and heritage is rather important in the sense that in the kind of official practice of UNESCO and therefore also the state of Finland means that it's kind of a regular established religious practices, they are excluded from the idea of cultural heritage. Then, of course, many of the practices, for example, in the UNESCO list are religious as such, that they are linked to different kind of belief systems. They may not be kind of a Catholic mass or anything like that in the system, but still that there are these various practices which then are often referred to as customary practices, where we go or where we enter a lot of problematic relations or questions concerning inclusivity especially and diversity also when it comes to gender relations, so that there's actually a lot of examples where you could say that they are blatant examples of gender discrimination, but more curiously I would say that the question of sexuality is something that's totally evaded in these systems. You cannot find really anything on sexuality on the UNESCO system. The kind of all these kind of questions of sexual diversity or multiple forms of sexuality, they are nowhere in this system. Which also you could say that it goes back to the customary practices, because there are and not just customary practices. The prime example for me, I'm going to wrap up, is reggae in Jamaica. The current legislation of reggae, current legislation of Jamaica has so-called anti-buggery laws, so that there are two sections or two paragraphs there which explicitly forbid male anal intercourse. So, meaning that homosexual relationships between males especially are illegal in Jamaica all over. And then there of course are several songs, especially in the past, and nowadays more in the realm of dancehall than reggae, where this issue is also present, and it really raises these questions that how inclusive are we in this sphere, and also then these questions of not the age aspect, but also you could say that this extends also to the so-called ableism questions, that where are those who have physical restrictions, functional restrictions, because they are also pretty much absent from the ICH sphere. I should note here very end that in Finland, in the list, the national list, not the national list, but the wiki inventory, we have this element called leimari, which is a dance party or party club event organized, I guess, irregularly, but still organized every now and then targeted mainly for sexual minorities, and it's there in the wiki inventory. And the future, then in the future we may see or not see whether it ever ends to the national list, but then it's the only example of that. And then I've been doing some comparative work with the Nordic countries, and it's only one in the Nordic countries too. Of course, it sort of opens the space for those minority issues, but it also raises the question of whether it's there in its insularity as a kind of a that is there a risk of tokenism, that it's there for the kind of idea of portraying the system more diverse than it actually is. And then the same applies to those African music and dance in Finland used to be on the list, and Elina knows more about the details there, but apparently because of the kind of a question that how does the community involve, that it was then taken away from the list, which of course I would say that that's a positive phenomenon in the sense that these lists are not immutable. We can change them, they can be changed, and they will change, of course. But then again, now the kind of replacement on the wiki inventory is Iranian classical music. So that we otherwise it's 90% folk music. Then you have this one. Then that's actually the only classical music reference in the whole wiki inventory, Iranian classical music, and then you have a couple of more popular musical styles there. but as the outcome, I would say that yes, the system fosters or focuses, when you think of it in terms of cultural policy, the system focuses on issues of creativity, but in the sense of creative industry, not as a kind of a condition of human beings and the kind of a cultural condition at that. And in terms of diversity and inclusion, the such system, I would say that there's much to be decided. Yes. Yes. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Antti-Ville, and thank you also for presenting the project. So I'm happy for that.
And I do apologize to you for getting
But I was there
Yep.
in the end.
Yep.
And Heidi has a question. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Could you please go back to the slide where you have this heritage and memory and the table?
This one.
Yes, this one. I think this is very intriguing, and I would like to ask them, do you think that these relations are also questions of authenticity? That in the left side you would have the more authentic side and on the right side?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean that, that's, I mean that now we come to the kind of also, I would say, in a way, maybe disciplinary and in some ways questions of that how do we actually define authenticity. That whether it goes back to the idea of provenance, that there's something that can be credibly proven that existed 500 years ago, and that's why it's in the glass box in the museum, and that's why it's heritage. But then where I come from, or the kind of cultural studies approach stresses the idea of authenticity as a value statement in itself. So instead of talking about authenticity, I'd rather talk about authentication. So that anytime we say that something is authentic, we ascribe value to it. And the same applies to the idea of heritage. So they are intimately interconnected. And yes, I could say that there is maybe authentic policies aren't discussed that often, but yes, certainly for the others, I would say that the importance of these kind of claims about authenticity increase when you come, and it's part of the increasing the value of the element or the thing of the past. Yep.
I have another question.
Yeah.
Well, I think that quite often you hear that kind of tradition precedes heritage. That's kind of a claim that I very often hear. And as a folklorist, I think there are many similarities between tradition and heritage. But tradition is also a value-based system.
Yeah.
And naming things as tradition is a similar process than naming things as heritage, I think. So what do you think about this?
Well, yeah, there's now I can't remember if it was Kaarina Siivonen or some other who wrote, I think, because this difference, yes, it's something that, their relation and difference, because, well, if they are the same thing, then why do we have two words for the same thing? Well, yeah, sometimes we might have, but still, usually the choice of words signals something. And the definition there, I think that it was Siivonen who put it something like this, that the tradition is the kind of broader field where the creativity is fostered, although restricted also through these kind of choices and emphasis that then define the authentic tradition within the certain kind of a community. And when we go to heritage, the importance of policy and branding increases. So then it becomes a kind of a question of political intervention, but also that the more stress is laid on economic and financial interests. So I think that was at least very helpful for me to make sense of the difference of these. That we are getting towards kind of more, let's say, institutionalized spheres when we go towards right in this figure.
Just let me add that the Helsinki Pride event has been added to the wiki just a couple of weeks.
Oh, right, okay, good. Yes. Well, yeah, yes, I have to say yes. That this comes from the end of May, I think, or something like that. But still, I mean that the wiki inventory is quite curious because one day I ended up going there in the different category and I found Putos, the TV show there. And I was wondering, well, what does this have to do here? That it's a commercial product. And then the entry was quite limited and clearly made by an individual, which raises the question that what are we talking about when we are talking about these groups and communities and individuals that are intended to be supporting these heritage activities? That here the system, I mean that the wiki platform enables an individual to make this kind of a entry. And apparently nobody at that point checks it out. So I actually wrote to the Finnish Heritage Agency and asked that what is this? What's the system? How does it work? And then they responded, oh, I've forgotten to check the list lately, and then she went back and deleted the entry. So, yep. So I've now also managed to interfere with the process.
Yes, thank you. Maybe we take a short break after these 10 minutes. Are we ready? Yes, great. Now I will switch my place from being the chair to being another presenter in this session. So now we are introducing with Heidi our next article that we are now writing. So the topic will be the Pelimanni house in Kaustinen and contradictory states of intangible cultural heritage. And so I'm Outi, Valo, and I work here in the Finnish Folk-Musiikki-instituutti as an archivist, and I'm now also in Antti-Ville's research project as a researcher. And Heidi, you can present yourself.
Thank you. I'm Heidi Henriikka Mäkelä. I'm not in the project, but I have worked quite a lot with Outi. I work as a lecturer in folk music at the UniArts Helsinki, and as a researcher at the University of Helsinki, and in the Finnish Literature Society. And my background is in folklore studies as well as in research of folk music.
Yeah, and Hannu unfortunately wasn't able to come here in Kaustinen, but he is a geographer and has been also part of our group writing this article, and he knows a lot about the construction of Finnish national landscapes, and he's lecturer of landscape studies in the University of Turku.
So we are going to talk today about Pelimanni house, Pelimanni talo, that is located here in Kaustinen. You have probably seen it quite many times. And it's the red house on the hill, top of the hill there in the festival area, the old house. And it was originally a farmhouse called Aapin Tupa, and it was located in Veteli, that is a neighboring municipality of Kaustinen, and it was built in the early 19th century. And it's an Ostrobotnian style farmhouse, so it's a traditional kind of house for this area. And it was moved to the center of Kaustinen in 1974 by Viljo S. Mäkelä, who was the director and later chairman of the festival organization. So it was kind of the move of the Pelimanni talo to this place was tightly related to the festival, Kaustinen Folk Music Festival. Here is a map you can see made by Hannu, Kaustinen on the top, and then there you can see here is Veteli. We are here in Kaustinen, here's Veteli, and it was originally from here, Pulkkinen village. The Pelimanni house is currently privately owned, but is mainly used as an event venue rented by the Finnish Folk-Musiikki-instituutti. And as we have probably noticed, it's one of the main stages for the Kaustinen Folk Music Festival. So, or at least in my mind, many this kind of famous folk musicians perform there. Also, local folk musicians perform there, and kind of the greatest names of Finnish folk music have performed in Pelimanni house. And the Pelimanni house also plays an important role in the UNESCO application video when Kaustinen fiddle playing was inscribed into the UNESCO list. So if you watch the UNESCO application video that's on YouTube, you can see glimpses of Pelimanni talo in many places there. In this study, that will be, I hope, will be a forthcoming article. Our research questions in that study are that what kind of selection and cultural heritage process led to the Pelimanni house becoming a place for folk music in the center of Kaustinen in the 1970s, and how has Pelimanni house been experienced as a place in the 1970s and 2020s, and what is the relationship between these senses of place and the heritage process. And when we talk about cultural heritage process, we mean a series of events in which a trace of the past is selected and produced as evidence worthy of preservation, and this is called a cultural heritage process, and this idea was from Professor Anna Sivula. We also refer to this very famous theorization of Laura Jane Smith, who talks about authorized heritage discourse, which is a European-centric and expert-driven way of defining and using cultural heritage. And when we talk about place today, we think it as a lived and sensed combination of location, site, and experience that becomes real and is in a state of constant change in personal and shared meanings, feelings, sensory perceptions, and understandings. And we also talk about sense of place in this presentation, by which we mean place-bound, momentary, transient, and personal, and experiential knowledge of a place that is formed and perceived on site, but at the same time, this experience of a place is linked to cultural representations, models, values, and practices. So basically what we think that no one can go to a place without kind of pre-understanding or knowledge about all their cultural understanding is reflected in the place. Materials we have in the background of this study are archive materials, especially newspaper articles from local newspapers here. We also base our study on author ethnographic experiences because we did some on-site observation last year, or I was here last year during the Kaustinen festival, and I experienced the Pelimanni house then. And Outi, who lives here, has experienced the Pelimanni house quite a lot, so she has been part of the cultural heritage process many times related to the Pelimanni house. So I'm a kind of an outsider when it comes to the Kaustinen circles, because I live in Helsinki. Even though I work in the field of folk music, I kind of consider myself as an insider in the Kaustinen fiddle playing, for instance, because that's not my instrument, and I'm not a professional in that sense. But Outi is a kind of an insider here. And Hannu was when we were writing this article, Hannu, it was a very interesting thing to have a total outsider, because he does not come from the area of folk music or from the field of folk music, so he had a kind of a totally different kind of perspective to these materials. When we read the materials, we invented two kind of concepts about the sense of place. And the first one is a forced sense of place. And by that we mean a situation where the process of selection as a heritage site is in conflict with the wishes and desires of the community, and where heritage values and meanings are almost forcibly attached to a place that might not otherwise be held by the local community. And the other concept we invented is a heritage-ized sense of place, which means an experience in which the community and the national public also has almost completely adopted an authorized heritage discourse the house, its materiality, the sounds within its walls, and the experience of those sounds are organically part of the heritage process, and at the same time they produce it.
Yeah. Here is the picture of the Pelimanni house in its original place, where it was situated in Purkkinen, so in the nearby village of Veteli. And here is the reference from the Kustaa Vilkuna, who was a famous in this field of collecting folklore, and also he was part of the Finnish Academy of Finland at that time. And he said that the value, when they were now thinking of this, that this house would be moved to another place, he said the value of the Aapintupa will be multiplied if we can rebuild as a Pelimanni house, a living museum under whose shelter traditional building skills and intellectual heritage will merge into a new, contemporary and continuously creative folk culture. In this way, the house would become a center whose uniqueness and uplifting significance would radiate to the whole region, to the whole of Finland, and beyond the borders of the country, to all those wide circles to which beauty of the past provides a secure and stimulating foundation from which the best and most enduring folk culture of the present day will emerge. So very big words and very big hopes for this house in the year of 68 by Kustaa Vilkuna. And but it wasn't such an easy project to actually move the house, because the petition against moving this house to a new place was signed by 1,064 residents here from Kaustinen, and the amount of residents at that time wrote 3,000 people were living here, so 1/3 of the population were against it. But in the other, and also the amount of minors were quite a big one at that time, so actually it might have been half of the population were against the moving the house in here.
Yeah, and it was there was this idea of demolition of the youth association house that you can see in the picture that preceded Pelimanni house in that place where it is now.
Yeah, so people didn't want that house would be removed and placed with this new house. And so the experience of the villager were ignored by appalling to this authority voice that we hear in the previous slide, for example by Kustaa Vilkuna, and of regional and national cultural heritage. And now we are referring to this idea of authorized heritage discourse, because they were of course these kind of official and high-level voices. So now we have, for example, opinion of one of the villagers. I wonder if the reasons for supporting the house are factual or propagandist, or to put it more modern terms, if the traces of brainwashing are visible. If the Aapintupa, when brought it here, is modified, powered and decorated, then its traditional purpose is lost cause. The Youth Association House is the only original cultural monument in the village from the time when Kaustinen went from being a background to a place of civilized social life. And so this was also mentioned in many of the newspaper articles against the moving the house, because it was really important place, especially for the musicians here in the town in the early 1900s. So we can hear that the community response of the house, that it was old and rotten. It was from the wrong village. That was also mentioned in many newspaper articles, and we can hear it. We have the big distance between the church of Veteli and Kaustinen. There are only 9 kilometers probably, or even that, so it's not really far away, the municipality line, but that was also referred many times. And then general atmosphere was deafening, tense and ignored, because they thought that the villagers' voice is not heard, but of course the authority voice was heard much easier way. But then we will see this kind of complete reversal of the first sense of place, because the authorized heritage discourse in a way won. The house was moved to a place, even though there were a lot of people against it, and it was also for us maybe we were also a little bit surprised that when we went there, and this is from our sorry.
Yeah, yeah. This is from Suomen Kuvalehti because do you mind if I say this? Yes. So the kind of atmosphere changed very quickly after the Pelimanni house was built here in Kaustinen, and the new sense of place came mainly from outside. So this was written by a journalist from the Suomen Kuvalehti. And this journalist kind of describes this house as an authentic piece of Kaustinen and Kaustinen folk music, and this discourse that they produced in Finnish media, Suomen Kuvalehti is still and was then one of the biggest magazines in Finland. So this kind of produced this new discourse about the house, and I quote. Aapintupa is the nesting tree of a Pelimanni heart. Järvelä's fiddle players played a piece in the hallway and the playing sounded handsome. The old wood takes music in wonderfully. The logs seem to absorb the echo of the playing and then send it back acoustically in a very delicate way. The listener needs everywhere only authentic furniture built exactly according to the old model.
Yeah. And then we have some references to our own diaries when we were making this ethnographic fieldwork there. And this is the from the October 24. At the concert you feel like you are in someone's home, in a very intimate space. Old boots hang in front of the open fireplace, and there are still racks for drying rye bread on the ceiling. This space has many elements from the past, present and future, creating an interesting layering effect. Behind the rye bread stands also round the microphone cords, and the microphone reaches over the performers. The performance will be streamed, also recorded in the archive from now to the future.
Yeah. So we didn't, when we made these notes, we didn't know about this discussion about the movement or the demolition or the petition that the Kaustinen villager had. So we were kind of brainwashed as well. So we had been, of course, in Pelimanni talo for many times, and we had dear memories about the house, and so we kind of wanted to experience the heritage, the folk music heritage of Kaustinen in the place. And so after we did these observations, when we then noticed that, oh my God, there was this kind of quite conflicted situation in the community when the house came here. So it was kind of an odd place for us to notice that.
Yeah. So in the end we thought that we are fully heritage washed in a way, and had adopted these practices, values and atmosphere of the heritage process, and so have also the Kaustinen villagers, because also there were no voices against this house after it was moved and have its new place here in Kaustinen. So also the media was quite silent about this fact afterwards, and everyone seemed to be okay with it. So the sense of place cannot be separated from the stories of what folk music Kaustinen, or for example folk music festival is, or from the cultural heritage process. And so isn't this actually what the voices of this authorized heritage discourse wanted? Because we saw, for example, in the slide earlier where the Gustav Vilkuna was referring to the wonderful possibilities of this house, how it emerges around the region and over the borders of the country and to this international level. And
yeah, that's what has happened. There's in the picture you can see the UNESCO this plaque on the wall of Pelimanni talo. So it's there. You can see it by your own eyes when you go there. So it's kind of a process that created itself.
Yeah. First there is a kind of vision, and then you little bit take out of the voices that are against the vision, and then you have in the end this kind of heritage process going on.
Yeah, and we thought that it would be very interesting to compare this Pelimanni House process to other processes where these UNESCO listings have been made, because as you can see, this is a very good example what kind of heritage mills there are behind these listings. So this heritage process has been going on since the 1968, or 1960s. So there is a huge story behind and huge amplification of authorized heritage discourse behind the listing of Kaustinen fiddle playing. So it would be very, very interesting to compare this process to other examples of UNESCO listings, folk music listings as well.
Yeah, because we were really thinking that do also the other elements have these processes where you little bit unify the idea of how people are talking about the heritage and what kind of visions end up with these processes.
Thank you.
Thank
very
you.
much.
Yes, and if you have questions, we are happy to answer them. Antti-Ville.
Just checking on detail, is the house in itself, does it have separate UNESCO status from the fiddling tradition and its related practices, or is it part of the fiddling? Is this house a fiddling practice?
Not really. This photo actually here was from the house, so and so
I can't really see what it says exactly, so it's
it says that Kaustinen fiddle playing and related practices and expressions, and then something about that it's inscribed onto the UNESCO list.
And then it of course sees in the video many times, so in a way it's part of the.
I would answer that I think that Pelimanni Talo is kind of part of the sound and part of the listing process indeed, because where does Kaustinen fiddle playing live, or where was it born, and so on. I think it materializes in these kinds of intersections of materiality and intangibility, and I think Pelimanni Talo is one of those places.
Was Pauliina made first?
Thank you so much. It's super interesting. This is maybe more like a comment than a question as such. I had an opportunity to do composing work in Pelimanni Talo when I lived in Kaustinen around 20 years ago. I composed a lot of solo material, and I played and composed in the Pikkutupa, the smaller room, and I just now started to think about my experience, because there is one layer in this. Of course, I understand that because of this process I have been able to enter the house and have the experience of doing the composing in that house, but I would say that I'm a kantele player, and for kantele I haven't found such an acoustic spot in the whole world so far, except this Pikkutupa. So I just want to add this one, that of course there is the stories and there is the that kind of things that have been told and kind of this brainwashing, but there could be also these kind of elements that are like kind of more neutral as well in relation with that house. And I just argue that this experience of mine, it is about my ears and a holistic embodied experience, and of course there is the story layer, but I think that I'm able to separate that from the physical embodied experience as a musician when I play in my instrument in that kind of room that really responds in that kind of way.
Thank you. That was a very interesting point of view, and I think we didn't have time to interview people who we have both played there in Pelimanni Talo, but I cannot say that I have that kind of same experience. But yes, I think if we kind of develop this idea, we should interview people who play there and how they kind of the sonic and acoustic environment also impacts the feeling of sense of place. But I still think that the kind of the stories that are told perhaps cannot be separated from the acoustic environment. I don't know. This is a kind of a discussion that is a very a very deep question.
Let's go to the beer.
Yeah. So, but it would be very interesting to see how these kind of experiences, how they communicate actually, and what is the place of stories in that experience.
And I think the idea of a bubble was in our diaries, and it was also in the newspaper magazines that it has this specific kind of place that it creates there with the music.
It can also be dependent on the instrument. I think that bundles can be more challenging in some ways than other instruments.
Giacomo includes
Yes. I mean, it's a fantastic story. and I mean, I think the main thing I was thinking all the time is that, like, this is the only case I know from the late 60s, early 70s in Finland where you destroy something and you don't build a parking lot. And that building is actually older than the other building, and that's striking, but probably this is part of the success. Of this building, in fact. And I mean, sometimes I've been thinking about these ideas of, acoustics and stories and memories, layers of the past and stuff like that. And I mean, in this particular case, I would go beyond your sense of place, and I've been using a bit the idea of terroir, like the French word for, it's used in relation to wine. Why wines, certain wines taste like that. Well, it's a combination of the soil, the sun, the work of people, the grapes, all that is conceptualized as terroir, and the terroir is unique. And somehow this is like this house is a terroir. No, it's like it has all these different ingredients which come together. And then the terms of terroir also goes beyond sense of place, because there's an element that is magic. And so there's an element that you cannot explain, that you can only explain via something is magic. And maybe here there is also that idea that
some kind of magic,
goes beyond the idea that okay, socially constructed. Yes, it is. But there's also something else.
I think this is a discussion of affective atmospheres and these kinds of things that people quite often experience in many places, this kind of magic, and they cannot kind of describe it with words, but it's more like a bodily embodied experience. Yes, and I really think, but what we try to argue in this, that these embodied experiences of magic are of course real, and the Pelimanni house probably has this kind of qualities in it, but they are in constant relation with the stories and this authorized heritage discourse. They do not exist. I want to argue that they do not exist without the authorized heritage discourse.
Rupa, did you have a question?
Thank you very much. It was so interesting that I missed the beginning, so I'm so sorry. I have just a question related to what happened to the place and to the people, the community after the inscription. I'm so sorry, I don't remember how the process was described in the file, in the nomination file. But what was the origin, and if you consider that to be a part of the heritage of the whole place, and what, I know it's just 4 years, but what do you think will happen next, or how do we perceive it, how do the communities really perceive the inscription itself?
Related to the house or oh, that's funny. Well, I think the house in a way it's so crucial part already that it's not the communities have approved it in a way, but it's very interesting in that point that many who were actually against the house in the early phases were musicians, because they loved the previous place which shown in the picture, because it has that place has had a big stage. So they liked the stage itself, and of course now the Pelimanni house that we have there's no stage. So and it's very like small place, and this was also a big space to perform. So there were actually musicians, a lot of them, who also read to the papers that this house should be there and not removed. And but I think it's not there anymore. So when the house was there, and we also interviewed a few of the people who were against, and now musicians who were against in the early phases, and they also said that they love the house now. So they have nothing against it, because it's perfect place to perform, like Pauliina said, it has this acoustics, and they were also referring to the fact that it's perfect place to perform for a musician.
Yeah. Well, and there were also these kind of class tensions in this process, because the Pelimanni house that we see today there in Pulkkinen, it was originally, as where is the picture of the original here. Yeah. This farm was quite rich, so they had a huge house. And when this was moved to Kaustinen, some of the working class members of the community said that this doesn't represent us. This is something too grand for us. So there were also these kinds of tensions. But yes, but that's what Outi said. Nowadays everybody loves Pelimanni house.
Yeah. Thank you. I think it's good time to end our presentation. And Lauri will be telling next about our safeguarding program called the Kaustinen Fiddle playing.
Yes, just 10 minutes of your patience and time and bottom muscles more, and then we are ready to go to the festival. So, I'm Lauri, Oino, and 1 week of the year I'm a videographer, and the rest of the year I'm the development manager for Kansanmusiikki-instituutti. And I've been quite involved with the Kaustinen UNESCO nomination process. I'm also chairperson of Kaustinen Näppärit Association, which is one of the 3 major associations that make the wheels go round here, especially when we talk about the practitioners. So the others are the Kaustinen Youth Association, whose house was demolished, but the new is up there, and then the Kaustinen Folk Musicians Association. As about those signs, I can tell as an anecdote that there's actually 5 of them, and for 5 these associations, 2 more are our institute, and then the Pro Kaustinen who organizes the festival, and ours is in the museum. The Pro Kaustinen sign still searches its place, and that one in Pelimanni house is the Näppärits sign, and the Folk Music Association sign is in the restaurant Pelimanni, because we thought that if we put the kids Näppärit sign to the restaurant that sells alcohol, it's not good in Finland. So yes, so Kaustinen was listed into the UNESCO list in 2021, as we know, but as we all probably know, also the UNESCO convention is not about listing, but it's about safeguarding. And so at least at the time of Kaustinen nomination process, the box where you had to explain your safeguarding activities was the biggest box in terms of minimum and maximum word amount. It's bigger than if I remember right, the word amounts are bigger than the boxes where you describe the phenomenon itself and the community. So it's really about safeguarding. And in this context, safeguarding, in my opinion, means keeping something that is vital vital also to the future. I don't know, this safeguarding, like semantically it sounds like something is put on the safe and then guarded. But okay, so as a part of this nomination process, we started to create this safeguarding plan, and also, of course, it was also already in the nomination file, but then we have developed it further and made it like more deep and more systematical. And basically, there's nothing so specific about it. The specific thing is that the community has like systematically viewed what is done, what there is, and what needs to be done. Basically, it's like quite normal strategy work, but I think that at this level of detail and systematicality, this may be like in Finland some kind of pioneering effort, at least if we talk about this limited and small communities and traditions of small communities. Well, this is the obligatory introduction. So this is based on workshopping during the nomination process. There was like a SWOT analysis and such things to map things out, and then this was developed further in our UNESCO working group, which consists of these 5 associations. And first of all, we like research like what are the key stakeholders, and they were grouped like in 3 groups that we found. And I must say that the idea of this safeguarding plan is that it's updated all the time, and this version was finished at May, and we already have noticed that there are many things missing and so on. So this is far from perfect. But so the first group is like these associations that are in hands of these tradition practitioners, and then the festival organization and our institute. But then there are, of course, these groups which are more or less organized. They are family groups, village groups, and then we have also professionals, and there should be also mentioned individuals, of course, because all this consists of individuals. Then the next group are mainly those organizations that offer education in playing music. The community colleges is super important. I would a little provocatively say that without the community college, the great Näppäri phenomenon wouldn't exist. Without conservatory, it might exist. Annika, don't get weird. Okay. Then there are some other like organizations which are quite closely related. Then there are the third circle. They are like part stakeholders that have something impact on the phenomenon, positive or negative. But like the municipality, if they decide to dig a hole in the festival area, all of a sudden, such things have happened. That has some impact on our activities. And then there are the regional organizations and the upper educational organizations like the Central UAS and Sibelius Academy and so on. And the business life, all these may have something to support the viability of the phenomenon or to counter it. Of course, you could add this list so that finally it would include like Trump and Putin and sun and moon. But well, they are such that we have like recognized that they have something to do. And then we come to Pelimanni Talo, because then we understood that we are also we need these walls and we need this Pelimanni Talo and other walls. So we mapped out like what are the walls needed now and in the future, in the possibilities, because these spaces they make a lot of things possible. Those things that go on now. If we for some reason lose those walls, then at least the conditions for the viability of this phenomenon changes, more or less. So that's a list of them, and the Pelimanni Talo is among them, of course. And then safeguarding this phenomenon is, I would say, it's a success story of decades. It has begun already a long time ago. And as you see, we recognize that we have a huge amount of safeguarding activities already now. These numbers refer to the implementation plan that we'll check just a little bit. So there's many kind of activities you can read, so I will read it for you. Then we recognize also a lot of new activities that we need. Some of them are quite specific, like revitalizing the activities of this house, because it's been a little downstream for a long time. Now it's getting better. The tourism is, of course, something that is expected to grow with the UNESCO nomination in this region, especially, which is not so touristic, and our touristic infrastructure and business life is quite small. But we have already seen that it's a long way to go when you build on nothing except for the festival, of course, but then there's the rest, other 51 weeks. But especially that first thing is something that we have talked a lot about, that we want to have all the community to at least know this phenomenon, and even if they don't ever want to play or dance or sell sausages on the festival, it's crucial that everybody would know it and feel part of it. And then we look to school, and we are not so happy situation now, because there's a lot of teachers here who have come from elsewhere and they don't know the heritage, and that's something where we want to put our fingers in. So then there's the monitoring plan, but that's basically like with every strategy. Then we have this implementation plan, and which is an exercise with this kind of boxes. And I just translated the one of them just to show an example. So what is our big aim if we want to keep this vital, so that we get new and new practitioners, and that's like the big target. And that means we need to have children and youth, and they understand the heritage, and it's meaningful for them. And then we have found out measures to do, a lot of measures that has to be done. And that's how it goes on. Then there's this is what was already mentioned. The children should learn to know it. Also adults, the Nappari education is a special thing. Then we need to have some occasions for playing. Nobody wants to play at home forever. And we have had to increase the attractiveness of this phenomenon. And then there's the second title, the enabling structures. I don't know, maybe not so good translation, but so there's all kind of supporting things that needs to work if things are going to. We wish the phenomenon to live on the festival. Then we have to have the knowledge. For instance, music recordings and materials and so on. And we need to have those spaces. Okay, this house is specially mentioned. So part of these activities are like in so detailed level that they are like one year projects also. And then we have of course the resources, money and people that we need. And then we wish to have some business development. So, and all of these are like connected to some measures and some results which we aim for, and then we wish to monitor it. Okay, there's the SWOT analysis, but we don't go into that. Then we follow it. There's very simple pattern which we haven't yet used. How is our situation from 1 to 3? Is it like miserable or okay or perfect or something like that? And what's the current direction of where each of these main aims are going? Is it stable or are we going downwards or upwards? So that's basically it, and we wish to, besides have this as a tool to work with this systematically, we also of course hope that this would be a usable example for other phenomena and their safeguarding. Okay.
Thank you so much. Would someone of Elina, you can ask questions.
I have a question. Is the Folkscandia project also part of safeguarding, or is it like separate?
Well, I think it's included in the. It's not like mentioned there, but it's included in the motivation part that you need to have occasions to perform and such motivating things. And actually, one thing that it was mentioned there was I don't know how it was exactly, but it was like big experiences. Mm-hmm. You have to have big experiences, and I think now that we had this start of the week, this Folkscandia project with the kids from 6 countries here, I think they had big experiences. So they are of course important.